Stories have always had the power to shape the way we think, feel, and see the world. A single novel can transport us to unfamiliar places, introduce us to remarkable characters, and spark passions we never expected to have. But can a book do more than entertain? Can it inspire readers to discover an entirely new sport? Across generations, literature has used sport as more than just a backdrop. It has captured the intensity of competition, the determination of athletes, and the emotional highs and lows that come with chasing success. Through compelling characters and immersive storytelling, readers are invited to experience sports they may never have encountered before, creating a connection that extends far beyond the final page. But does that connection translate into real world interest? Can a fictional story encourage someone to follow a sport, attend an event, or even take up playing themselves? Or is the growth of a sport simply the result of broader cultural changes, increased media coverage, and rising popularity that would have happened regardless? In this documentary, we'll speak to psychologists, authors, sports organisations, and readers to explore the relationship between literature and sporting fandoms. Together, we'll investigate whether the stories found in books have the power to influence the sports people choose to embrace. This documentary asks one central question: have sports that have been featured in literature seen an increase in their fan base, or has it simply been coincidental? Isha Patel is a contemporary romance author from the United States and a published author with Avon Books. She is best known for her sports romance novels Off Track and Overdrive, which are centered around the world of Formula One. Following the success of these novels, Patel expanded her sports fiction writing into lacrosse with Cross My Heart and Long Hot Summer. Her experience writing across different sporting worlds made her particularly relevant to the aim of this documentary. Patel gives an author's perspective on the relationship between literature and sport, as this documentary explores whether sports featured in literature can contribute to an increase in fan bases. Patel provided insight into the creative process behind incorporating sport into fiction and the potential influence this can have on readers. Her experience writing about Formula One was particularly valuable given the sport's significant growth in popularity in recent years, as it provided an opportunity to consider whether literature can contribute to introducing new audiences to a sport that they may not previously have followed.
My name is Isha. I started writing books properly probably around when I was in high school. So that was, oh my God, I don't even want to say how long ago that was. It feels weird. But around when I was in high school, I started writing proper books and I independently published a couple of books well into when I was in college. And then I got my publication deal with Avon
Yeah.
for Off Track, which was super exciting. And so that's when I became traditionally published. That was like the big turning point in my writing journey for me. Um, and at that point, I published Off Track, Overdrive with Avon, which were the Formula One romances that kicked off the whole sports romance thing for me. So that's kind of when I started writing sports romance in particular. And then after that, it was Cross My Heart and now Long Hot Summer, which are like lacrosse romances. And we'll see what sport we do afterwards. But for now, it's like those four sports romances are kind of like that was like where everything like sort of pivoted with
Mhm.
Avon. But yeah, I feel like that's like kind of a good summary. I just love to write romances that kind of take place against the backdrop of like something else, whether that be sports or like a workplace romance or something like that. Like kind of against the backdrop of something else because you
Yeah.
really get to see the characters like in an environment that's not just like interacting with each other. So with F1 romance in particular, I started getting into Formula One through like Drive to Survive,
Mhm.
which I feel like is how a lot of people, at least when I started getting into it, were exposed to it because I started watching, I want to say now it's like 5 years ago, maybe. Best guess. I don't know how many seasons I've actually like properly watched because I got like really busy during some of those years. But I started watching it and it just seemed like an excellent place to put some drama just because there's only 20 people in the sport, so you get to focus on like a smaller group of characters rather than like, oh, if I'm writing like a football romance or a soccer romance or something like that, it's like a bigger team, and so many more people. um, and I just feel like Formula One has the advantage of kind of being very exclusive, and I don't know, it sort of just gives like glamour and glitz and all of those things. And I think that is just something fun to set a romance in and of itself. And also, it's just a fun setting on its.
Oh,
And now it's really cool to see that this genre has just like exploded.
oh,
Like you can't go like you can't honestly scroll through Amazon for 2 seconds without seeing a Formula One romance, which is really exciting because now that's gotten so many more people into the sport.
so when you wrote Off Track and Overdrive, how did you
Mhm.
balance explaining Formula One for readers that might be completely new compared
Mhm.
to readers that already know about Formula One and but keeping it engaging for those? How did you
Mm.
balance that?
Yeah, so off track kind of starts like in the middle of a race at the very beginning of at the very beginning, but it's in the middle of a race. I don't know at the beginning of the season. It's the middle of the season, I think, when this race happens, or at least like getting toward the end. So that offered me kind of a space to like sort of just like explain a little bit about, like they're in the car, they're on the track, like these are like kind of like the basics. But I feel like I really got to get into it because um the actual like bulk of the book starts in like the preseason. And I feel like that affords me some space to explain a little bit of like what the sport is, what's going to happen over the course of like the next, I don't know, 20 or so races. I'm just like spitballing a number off the top of my head because I can't remember the exact numbers, but 20 or so races. And also just going through those races one at a time. I think I spent a little bit longer on that first race just to make sure that I like nailed down like, okay, like this is practice, this is like qualifying, this is the actual race, and then this is what happens in between those things. So I just spent a little bit longer at the beginning trying to explain. And it's really hard, I think, to avoid info dumping because there's just so much, and you don't want readers to think like, oh my God, now I'm reading like a nonfiction book. This is crazy. I picked up a romance book. I just need to know enough to get by. But then you also have people who have the knowledge or who don't have the knowledge who want to know more
Yeah.
about the sport. So I think it's just like kind of finding like a healthy balance because I don't want to give away like so much information that it feels like you're just reading nonfiction versus give away so little that you're like, I'm not really sure what's going on and like it's not setting the scene right. And with Overdrive, I actually got to get into a different side of the nitty-gritty because it's like more of like the specs and like the technology and that stuff, which was really cool. I learned a lot. I have no background in engineering or technology. Those are not at all in my wheelhouse. But I got to talk a little bit about like, oh, like these are like this is like the simulators, this is how we train, all of these things. And I think that also gives me some room to talk about the sport because Chantal, who's the female main character, comes into it like not really knowing much about
Mhm.
Formula One. So as she is learning, like I feel like the audience also organically gets that chance to learn with her. So I would actually say Overdrive is a little bit more beginner friendly because I think Off Track throws you into it a little bit, whereas like Overdrive, like you and the character who is in this book, like the main character, are both maybe unfamiliar with the sport. You get some time to learn and like just to
Yeah.
get to know how things work.
My name's Ruby, and in my free time, I like to read mostly sports romance. Probably always hockey the most after reading the off campus series. It was just so interesting the way she writ about it and the effort that she put into going into great detail to make sure that people knew the basic rules in order to be able to follow along. Just the way that obviously in other sports books sometimes they like to complicate it a bit and go further than the basic knowledge. In hers she liked to introduce it basically and then she'd develop on it while still making it understanding to everyone else. I think if someone's read a story that they've liked and it's featured a sport, I think people tend to make an effort into learning a bit more about the sport in order to feel connected further to the book and understand it a bit more.
So is that what you did?
Yeah.
Did you research about teams?
Yeah, so I researched the NHL and then picked a team from the NHL, Toronto Maple Leafs, and then I followed the English ice hockey team, which was the Coventry Bears. The NHL is all over TikTok, so I think I would have seen it some way, but I wouldn't have the understanding I do now if it wasn't for the books.
I think it offers a different layer of kind of engagement with sport, and I think that's why it gets so many people into it. Um, and like regardless of what critiques people may have as to like, oh, like you read Formula One romance or that's how you got into the sport, whatever. Mind you, all of that aside, I think it's just easier to connect with something when there is a story and there are characters, especially characters that have like emotions that we know of. We know of all the things that are going on in their lives, why they are so attached to the sport or why they're so dedicated to the sport. Like we know about all of that. Whereas on TV, like we know a little bit about these drivers, but we don't really know so much about like
Mhm.
what makes, I guess, like what we know a little bit about what motivates them, but we don't really get to see like the emotional side of it so much and like their interpersonal relationships and things. And I think that that's fine. I think that that's a line that needs to be drawn. Um, but with fiction, I think there's something about being able to be inside a character's head that I think like really gets someone into like, I'm rooting for this person, I'm cheering this person on, I really hope they win. And at the end of the day, I think it ups the stakes a little bit too, for the reader. So I think that this is some reasons why someone, want to pick up a romance book. Like if you're already into reading and you're already into getting like really in the head of characters, I feel like a romance book would be a good avenue
Mhm.
for you to maybe discover a different sport because I think that there's already that like you're going into it knowing that you're going to kind of form the like imaginary bond per se with the
Yeah.
character. But fiction, I think just provides like a different kind of highway to, okay, like I'm getting really into the sport because I know what these people like, I'm learning what these people like go through and kind of like what the behind the scenes look like. Or like maybe you just live for the drama and that's totally okay. It makes me like really happy to hear people be like, I felt like I was like actually there. Like
Yeah.
this was like super immersive and like we were like running the race. Like the way that it was described was just fun to read, even if it's not 100% realistic, which it's not. Like I've never been in a Formula One car. Even if it's not super realistic, it like people will be like, oh, it like puts me in the car. I'm like that's like that's all I could ask for in terms of the Formula One. I've tried my best. But yeah, so it makes me really happy to hear people be like, this is like accurate or this is enthralling or like this is pulling me into that world.
Mhm.
Because I feel like even if you don't have 100% accuracy, at the end of the day, like I feel like the goal is that somebody enjoys reading this book. And if that's, learning more about the sport or, feeling like they're really in that world, like I feel like that's a win. So yeah, I would say, I would definitely say, um, people have said that the books have kind of gotten them like more into the sport or even like, like just like this is my first like foray into Formula One, dipping my toes into the water a little bit.
Do you think that books and literature have the power to create sports fans, or do they just simply attract people who are already interested?
Hmm. I absolutely think they do, which I might be biased. This is not to do with Formula One. This is to do with the lacrosse books. But I didn't really know much about lacrosse before I wrote
Mhm.
those books, other than that it was like a really obscure, semi-obscure sport. I mean, it depends where you are in the United States. Where I am, I had a ton of like when I was in like elementary school, I had a ton of classmates who played it. Like, like all these like lacrosse playing guys. And then like we started like a girls lacrosse team, which was really great in like our school district. And it's kind of started to gain some traction. And one of my close friends who like helped me she actually helped me take some pictures and stuff with the books too. She lent me pictures of it with her lacrosse stick and her jersey and stuff, which is super cool. But I didn't know anything about the sport, and it definitely got me more into it writing the books. So I imagine maybe it could get someone into it reading the books.
Mhm.
That's kind of my personal experience with, like I would definitely say that books and literature got me more into that. Um, and again, like I've seen people pick up off track and be like, this has encouraged me to watch Formula One. I've never really done that.
Yeah.
Whether it's like my own friends or family or just readers who reach out to me, I definitely think that it has the potential to do that. Because again, you create that, like we were talking about earlier, that tighter bond with like a
Yeah.
person and the characters that they're reading about. And I think that that has the potential to kind of tease along, like, oh, like maybe I want to see more about this sport. Like these people seem really driven and really passionate about what they do. And I hope that in real life they're the same. Maybe I'm going to go and watch the sport and find out. So
Yeah.
I absolutely think that it has the power to do that, and I think it's creating like a not at all in a bad way. I think this is a very good way of creating a new generation of sports fans that are like welcoming and just like a really tight knit community. Um, and it's not, you can't be in this in the community of fans that enjoy the sport because you got into it XYZ. Like they're more welcoming, and it's just I feel like it's a different vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's the really cool thing about books, literature, and sports romance. That it's like creating this like wonderful crowd of like there's a tight-knit sports romance community already. So it's just kind of building on that. And I think that that's really neat. So to answer your question, long story short, yeah, I absolutely think so. And I think with Formula One, it's been especially beneficial because the sport has for so long been, like male fans who are like, oh, like maybe some welcoming, some not so welcoming. I think it's a little bit of a mix. I think it varies because I'm not going to say that everybody is just one kind of person. And now I think romance, especially, is giving like um, people who identify as women an ability to get into this sport because I think that that's not traditionally been something that's been either super accepted or there hasn't really been a way to get into it. And now with like F1 Academy and all of these things that are going on, like things are getting so much better. I feel like it's like there wasn't really like so much space to get into it. And if you got into it through Drive to Survive, sometimes people will have something to say about it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, like I don't know how comfy I feel in this space. And I think that books have definitely helped increase that comfort level.
Without
Um,
doubt.
yeah. So
Oh, that's perfect. I will stop this
Mhm.
recording. Gaining a reader's perspective is particularly important because it provides a first hand account of how literature can influence an individual's relationship with sport. While an author can explain the intentions behind writing a sporting story, and a psychologist can explore the potential psychological reasons why readers become emotionally invested in fiction, the reader demonstrates what this influence can look like in reality. Including a reader ultimately allowed the documentary to ask not only whether literature can influence sports fandom, but what that process actually looks like for an individual. Their story provided a tangible example of the possibility that a reader can move from simply enjoying a fictional story to developing a genuine interest in the real world sport it portrays. So throughout both interviews with author and reader respectively, So, throughout both interviews with author and reader respectively, multiple viewpoints have been explored, which I agree with. Most importantly, with how authors write their sports novels with both knowledgeable and new fans alike when explaining the sport. They ensure to give enough information so the readers who may not know nothing at all could understand, whilst also balancing the amount of information as not to give out so much that the readers that are already fans of the sport do not feel as if it is an information dump upon them. This is something that I personally, as a reader and sports fan, find extremely important, as it can not only give current fans an outlet into a different form of their favoured sport, but it can also create a space where new fans can be grown and emerge into the sport's existing fan base.
My name is Craig Jackson, and I'm a professor of workplace health psychology at Birmingham City University. One of the things I'm interested in as a psychologist, is movies and cinematography and how cinema can be used to change or influence behavior. This is why books and films often get banned by the authorities, because authorities are worried that people's behavior will be changed or influenced, and often not in a good way. Some of the most popular selling books and creations are with characters that we all relate to or we all want to be. Dirty Harry, by the way, if I could, Dirty Harry, he's my hero, he's my legend. And writers know this. They know what makes a great story, they know what makes a great character, and they know what we want to be. So we project ourselves onto them, So if you look at some of the first books with Katniss Everdeen, it might not have said what the colour of her eyes were, or the colour of her hair, or her physical shape. And where there's ambiguities there, we fill in with ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm the same height as Dirty Harry. Excellent. I've got the same skin colour as Dirty Harry. I've got the same hair. So we fill in the gaps, and that makes it really powerful because it's fantasy, and we get to live out aspects of our life we wish we could. So you're Katniss, I'm Dirty Harry. We've probably got generations of Harry Potters out there. We've got generations of all sorts of heroic characters, and that's good. And that's the power of reading. And long may that last, because if that stops, then kids aren't going to pick up books anymore. Jerry Seinfeld years ago said, every man views themselves as a low-level Superman. In everything we do, we see ourselves as being like Superman in plain clothes. And I think Freud pretty much kind of said that, and Jung said that. Coming up with a scenario or a setting or a plot that's never happened to people, that's out of their experience, again, is another golden ticket. If you think of things like Ready Player One, that's kind of set in this dystopian future that's video game and AI, or if you think about E.T., how many of us actually had a little pet alien? When writers can come up with something that nobody has genuinely experienced, but it's not so far-fetched that they can't put themselves in that position, that's the trick. Jaws is a fine example by Peter Benchley. Hardly any of us have been attacked by a great white shark, and certainly not one that keeps coming back for more and more and more. But we can all imagine what that's kind of going to be like.
Yeah.
And that's the role of imagination. He's taking something that has got some feasibility, some potential to it, but taking it to the nth extension and making it almost incredible, but not impossible. So this is all again about creativity and balance and knowing just what the thing with writing a good book and creating something is you're giving the reader a spoonful of honey every couple of chapters and then a little bit more to keep them going. And a very good author will keep that going throughout the book. But the same with filmmakers. If you think about Jaws, you never see the shark for the first 40 minutes of the movie. And I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who said, let me get this right because it's a confusing quote. He said, a bomb going off is fear, but a bomb not going off is suspense. So when you think about it, writing a novel is really, really psychological. You're getting your hands into people's heads and messing around with their brains. It's not just as easy as sitting down and doing 1,500 words a day and hoping you get something. It involves some real clever thinking. I couldn't do it. I'd love to. Don't think I can. Would I agree that fictional stories influence the way we think about everything else? Yes, and I'm glad they do. Because I don't know about you and lots of other people, but my life has been made better and more interesting by the books I've read and the movies I've seen, the concepts, the ideas, the ethical dilemmas, the idea of living on another planet or turning into, some kind of supreme being. All of these books and concepts are fantastic. I mentioned Clockwork Orange before, and the central concept in that always keeps me awake is in Clockwork Orange, it's all about changing young, violent men into non-violent. So God bless the writers, particularly the difficult ones who write books that make us ask awkward questions. Even those who end up getting cancelled because they might put things in books that we think is disgusting or disgraceful or immoral, and we ban it, and then we ban the writer. Well, they're just asking questions, just like stand-up comedians do. They make up situations and say jokes that you think is funny, and then think, oh, whoa, that's a bit awkward. That's a bit unfunny. I'm glad they do it because they make us think. So, we need some more writers, I think, who make us think. I think. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was giving this a bit of thinking because sports movies isn't something I've really focused on in my studies. So I was trying to sit down and think about it. And I looked at a load of the sort of lists of the best sports movies ever. And I think the best one I found was Rotten Tomatoes. They did a list of the 150 best sports films ever.
Yeah.
Some of them were documentaries, but most of them weren't. They were stories. And I worked out that your sports movies fit into 7 categories. And this is a formula. And I think if your sports novel or sports movie ticks some of these boxes, you're onto a winner. Okay, so I just made a little note of them. Firstly, good sports film is about an underdog, either a team, Jamaican bobsleigh team in Cool Runnings, or someone who's got a physical disability who has to overcome something. So, story about an underdog. Everybody loves an underdog story. Secondly, sex roles. Bend it like Beckham. The next one, of course, is biopics, the story of heroes or villains So, about Formula One drivers or golfers or baseball players. If someone's a hero or villain, that makes a great, great film. And often they have a little bit of embellishment in there in case it's just a little bit boring. Next one, scandals. Scandals in sport. I think the one that topped the list for Rotten Tomatoes was the film about the Tonya Harding, the American ice skater who crippled her opponent.
Yes.
That they rate that as their number one sports movie because it's all about exposing us nasty, nasty behavior. Last three, kids teams, sports film, Bad News, Bears, Mighty Ducks, anything with a bunch of kids who are rubbish, but then they meet the right coach, who's usually an alcoholic, who then coaches them how to be better people and better baseball players or ice hockey players. So kids teams, you're onto a winner. Extraordinary feats. Here's another one. Sports movies about people who've done extraordinary weird things. Climbing up a mountain without oxygen. Walking between the World Trade Centers on a wire.
Mm-hmm.
Going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. Technically not always sports. Some of them are, but some of the weird feats that almost seem physically impossible. And the final one I came up with was oddball sports movies.
Mm-hmm.
So there was, what was the one with Timothy Chalamet earlier this year? Marty Supreme.
Yes.
The history of some oddball table tennis champion nobody had ever heard of. Because it was just so odd and weird. Or there was the Eddie the Eagle film.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't really biopic because it was more sort of made up and fantasy in a way. So movies that talk about oddball sports or oddball people can be quite good. If you can get all 7 of those into your sporty movie, you could be onto a blockbuster that changes people's behavior.
In order to gain a different perspective and an explanation of why we, as human beings, may be drawn to stories and develop emotional connections with fictional characters, I chose to speak to a psychologist. While authors can provide an insight into the intention behind creating sporting stories, and sports organisations can comment on changes within their fan bases, psychologists can offer a deeper understanding of what happens to us as readers. Their expertise allows the documentary to explore whether the relationship between literature and sports fandom could be explained through psychological factors such as emotional attachment, empathy, identification, and curiosity. I wanted to understand whether becoming invested in a fictional character could encourage a reader to become interested in the world that the character inhabits, including the sports itself. This perspective was particularly important because the documentary does not aim to simply suggest that the rise of sports fiction has caused an increase in sports fans. Instead, I wanted to investigate the possible reasons behind this connection and consider whether there is a psychological explanation for why someone might move from reading about a sport to watching, following, or participating in it. Including a psychologist, therefore, allowed me to move beyond anecdotal evidence and consider the wider human behaviour behind sports fandom. Their contribution provides an academic perspective that can be contrasted with the experiences of authors, sporting organisations, and individual fans, helping to create a more balanced investigation. While there is no specific study that proves literature directly influences sports fan bases, the recent rise in interest surrounding sports featured in fiction suggests that there may be a connection worth exploring. In ice hockey, for example, the popularity of books such as Off Campus and Heated Rivalry has coincided with increased online conversations around the sport. I reached out to the Nottingham Panthers, and Chris Ellis from the team explained that the recent rise in fiction has certainly seen more interest in the sport online, and those social media conversations have come across the Panthers' timeline. However, whether it has had any direct impact on attendances is impossible to tell, and perhaps that is where the difficulty lies. Unless sporting organisations begin asking new supporters where their interest in the sport originated, it is almost impossible to establish a direct link between a book and a new fan. Someone may discover a sport through a novel, but then encounter it through social media, a friend, a player, or a live event. By the time they walk into a stadium, it becomes difficult to know what first sparked that interest. So, for now, we cannot say that literature is directly responsible for growing sports fan bases, but we also cannot say that its influence is purely coincidental. What we can see is that sports is becoming an increasingly prominent part of modern literature, introducing readers to sporting worlds they may never have encountered. And the popularity of sports fiction continues to grow. So does too the opportunity to understand whether those stories are creating new fans or simply giving existing fans another way to experience the sports they already love. Perhaps the answer isn't about whether a book can single-handedly create a fan. Perhaps it is about whether a story can be the first step, the moment where curiosity begins. Perhaps literature doesn't create every fan, but by allowing readers to experience the emotions, triumphs, and challenges of a sport through storytelling, it may inspire curiosity that extends beyond the final page. Because sometimes becoming a sports fan doesn't start in a stadium. Sometimes it starts with a story.